Hi, my name is Nilza, and I will be speaking about the Chernobyl radiation hazards in Pripyat, Ukraine. The overall objective of this presentation is to explain the incident in Ukraine by going over the events leading up to the disaster, explaining the main radionuclides involved, and describing the environmental effects that this disaster caused. I'm going to start off with the timeline of the event, then the radionuclides involved and their impact on the country, explain the countries impacted. After that, talk about the number of individuals exposed per country, followed by the disability rates of those exposed, and then finally, death rates. After that, I will talk about present day Chernobyl and summarize all my findings. On April 25th, 1986, at approximately 1 a.m., a routine safety test began in order for operatives to see if when they reduced power, if the plants would still be able to produce enough electricity to keep pumps running even in the event of a power failure in reactor number 4. Operators were given permission to start the test, and this occurred with less experienced staff on site. This led to the emergency cooling system being disabled, which coincidentally is what made this tragedy so severe. On April 26, 1986, at 1:23 a.m., an unexpected power surge occurred. Operators tried pressing the emergency shutdown button and the control rods jammed. 54 seconds later, the first explosion began, followed by another. Fireballs erupted in the sky, air filled with dust and graphite chunks, and finally, radiation spewed out everywhere. As a result of this, first responders arrived on the scene to try to alleviate issues, unaware of the radiation and without PPE, which of course exposes them. Soviet officials conduct an emergency meeting in order to further alleviate issues, and reactors 1 through 3 are shut down. In an attempt to slow down the radioactive emission, sand, clay, boron, and lead are dumped into the burning core. Officials start the evacuation process at about 2 p.m. on April 27th without informing their citizens of the hazardous public health issue, which also increases exposure. Between April 28th and 29th, outside countries start to detect a huge amount of radiation and confront officials who in return lie about the status, saying that everything is under control. Between May 4th and 9th, 1986, the repairing process begins. Liquid nitrogen is pumped underneath the dead reactor in order to cool it. Cleanup crews of up to 800,000 workers begin bulldozing contaminated villages, killing contaminated livestock, and burying contaminated topsoil. A week and a half post the disastrous event, Soviet officials finally closed schools and advised residents not to eat leafy vegetables. Workers then finished draining 20,000 tons of radioactive water under the core, and concrete is poured under a reactor to create the sarcophagus. On May 14th, the announcement of this tragedy is officially done on state TV by a Soviet leader. In August, there is a conference hosted by the International Atomic Energy Agency that explains the accident as a human error and design flaw. And finally, in December 15th, 2000, shutdown of final reactors occur. The major radionuclides that were present during this incident were iodine-131 and cesium-137. Iodine-131 has a half-life of approximately 8 days. After the disaster, there was a huge fallout of iodine, which increased thyroid exposure. The thyroid gland uses iodine from the bloodstream as part of its normal metabolism. Exposure occurred through inhalation and digestion of food, especially milk, which contains high levels of radioiodine. Children were found to be the most vulnerable population of thyroid cancer among those exposed. Drinking milk from cows that ate contaminated grass immediately after the accident was one of the main reasons for the high doses to the thyroid of children, and why so many children subsequently developed thyroid cancer. Cesium has a 30-year half-life. Concentrations were found around houses where rain had transported radioactive materials from the roof to the ground following the incident. Cesium-137 is mainly found in food products like berries and mushrooms. As per the timeline on previous slide, Soviet officials waited so long to disclose the urgency of this public health issue, which directly resulted in the high number of exposures seen. Although this occurred in Ukraine, Belarus and Russia have seen considerably high rates of exposure, being that these countries lie right next to each other. This chart outlines the total number of people exposed between the years of 2003 and 2007. It was found that Ukraine had the highest number of radiation exposure with 651,453 liquidators, or 72%. Liquidators are also known as those that were directly or on the scene, followed by Russia with 157,086 liquidators, or 17%, and finally Belarus with 99,693 liquidators, or 11%. Disability rates in Ukraine have also been increasing significantly. It was found that 1.8 million people, including 377,000 children, were seen as victims from this disaster because they were directly in harm's way and their families have suffered. Disability among the Ukrainian population has risen from 40,000 in 1995 to over 100,000 in 2018. This is due to these liquidators not being aware of the hazardous disasters that they were thrown in. Because of this, to this day, Ukrainian governments are paying benefits for those who were immediately affected by this disaster. This includes widows of men who suffered from the accident and their children. Finally, when looking at the death rates between the years of 1988 and 2012 within the country of Ukraine, it was found that these rates have increased from 3.5 deaths per thousand people to over 17 deaths per thousand people due to acute radiation sickness, cancers, depression, extreme alcoholism, and others. Today, another nuclear tragedy is still an issue that we are facing with Russia's war on Ukraine. Chernobyl now serves as a nuclear waste storage, but it is still radioactive, which increases both the nuclear risk and contamination. Countries like the US have tried to put a stop to Russia's invasion of Ukraine because of fear that this can be a repeat of the 1986 incident. To summarize, this accident was caused by a flawed reactor design and human error, but its effects heightened with the apprehension of Soviet officials to informing their people and the world of this disastrous event. Thank you.